Central location for you is a must as you stagger about, making free with your dude and lascivious pose. We all know you're soft cause we've all seen you dancing. We all know you're hard cause we've all seen you drinking from noon until noon again. You're the boy with the filthy laugh. You're the boy with the Arab strap. Comic celebrity takes a backseat as a cigarette catches and sets off the smoke alarm. What do you make of the cool set in London? You're constantly updating your hit parade of your 10 biggest wanks. She's a waitress and she's got
Whoops. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Praxis workshop on Instascholars and Instagram scholarship. I'm Danielle Taschereau-Mamers, and I'm the Managing Director of the Critical Digital Humanities Initiative at the University of Toronto. This morning, we are fortunate to have two co-hosts who are going to be delivering the workshop. One is Tanya Rohrmoser, who is a writer and communications officer for CDHI. She received her MA in English Literature from Brock University in 2010, and she's a graduate of the Professional Writing and Communications program at Humber College. She has done consulting for local businesses and worked in communications roles for House and Home Media, TIFF, University of Toronto Press, and Ridley College. And I am very grateful to have her now as my colleague at the CDHI. And our second host is LK Bertram, who I see in the room, but their camera is not, there they are. LK is an associate professor in the Department of History here at the University of Toronto. Her research centers on the history of migration, material culture, and gender sexuality in North American colonial history. Her curatorial work explores digital and in-gallery approaches to gendered media and histories of colonialism, trauma, and sexuality. Her current work focuses on making sex work-related archives accessible to larger audiences, which includes creating a historical brothel map of Toronto. And without further ado, I have some housekeeping notes at the end of the, or I guess I should say we're recording this session to make it more accessible to our colleagues. I'm also going to turn on the live transcript, or I'm going to request that the live transcript gets turned on. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to LK and Tanya. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's so wonderful to see you here. Tanya and I have been really excited to work on this presentation together. And we've got a lot of hot tips for you today to up your social media presence, but also to take action on a really serious issue that concerns all academics today, which is the issue of disinformation and making sure that we're able to mobilize good information quickly to larger publics. Tanya, do you want to do the screen share for the Canva, or would you like me to do it?
Let me do, hang on one moment. Let me make sure I'm sharing it. Great. All good? Can you see?
Perfect. Yeah. Yes. So today when we started like chatting about what we were going to do, we actually met to kind of build this workshop together, and it's been really fun to get to know Tanya. Tanya had this great quote about engagement, and this is something that I think for a lot of scholars, we get a little bit lost sometimes when we think about public engagement, what that means and what it could mean. And that we benefit and the public benefits as well when we do create a larger public presence for our research. And there's no way to really know how your research will land and like in traditional academic circles until like after your book comes out or after an article comes out. And I mean, you already did the research, the project is done, right? So how could things be different if we're actually producing content sort of continuously for the public and getting guidance also about what it is that people need right now and what it is that they're looking for?
So just to look at the presentation ahead, we're going to just talk a little bit about who we are, how we came to social media and to Instagram in particular, an introduction to algorithms, bias, and misinformation. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes for good content and then building your practice. So how you can start working on having a presence on Instagram as well. So I'll turn it over to Lori so she can introduce herself and how she came across, how she came onto social. She's got a brand new Social for Scholars account as well. So highly recommend that you give that account a follow. It'll be providing lots of great information on social media for scholars and researchers.
Thanks so much, Tanya. Yeah, I started this Social for Scholars account. It's brand new. I just started it a few weeks ago. And I started it because I've been waiting for someone to do this and no one has. So I was like, I guess this means I should do this. And it's, we get virtually no guidance about how to mobilize our research on social media. And this is significant for people that work either as researchers, scientists, academics, and also people that work for nonprofits that are dealing with just mobilizing facts. There's a lot of ways in which these algorithms and these social media platforms treat that data and that kind of content in really specific ways. And we have to learn more about how we can better use those tools and get around a lot of the problems with them as well, because these are very problematic platforms. And in the past, I think the problems with them have made a lot of scholars really back off and be like, I'm not using that. That is so problematic. And let me tell you, I wholeheartedly agree, having, developed a larger scale Instagram practice, like it is profoundly problematic. The problem is that the horse has already left the barn, so Instagram is either the number 2 or number 3 biggest social platform in the world. It's also part of this new age of video and image-based social media that's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if we want to sit on the sidelines and say like, that's problematic, I'm not doing that, I totally understand why. But there's other people that are stepping into our shoes and saying like, okay, no one's taking control of the debate about, this issue or that issue. I'm just going to Google a few things and I'll do it. And we run into all kinds of problems. And there's numerous issues that I'm sure you're all thinking of right now that explain sort of like why all these things are happening so soon after the rise of these social media platforms. Oh, sorry, Tanya, I should do it. Would you mind clicking?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I'm going to introduce myself first, just to let you know how I came to it. And my screens are a little all over the place, so don't mind me. So like Danielle introduced, I was an English major, and the period of time that I really loved was the 18th and 19th centuries. So long winding sentences, the big books like Pamela and Tristram Shandy, and like the big long sentences. I love that. And after I left, I went to do a postgrad in professional writing and communication. And the very first thing they did on our first day was have us write on a Post-it note, don't write like an academic. And then they had us stick it on our computer. And anytime we were doing work, like that was what we had to do. And it was at first like a little bit jarring. And but they were teaching us to write for the public. And there's a craft to that, to pulling high level information and presenting it in a way that's accessible and thinking about your audience in different ways. And slowly over time, my writing shifted. I still always am going to love those long sentences and those thick blocks of text that are just so beautifully crafted. But the reality was I wasn't getting grades when I did that. So I had to change my approach. It was about concision. We would learn things like heat maps of where people are looking on the screen, how they were taking in information, and how we could write for a web audience, for social media, really losing some of those extra fluffy words that you don't need, and really thinking about meeting the audience where they are. And so early on in my career that's where I came across the quote, "Clarity comes from engagement," because there were so many things I was doing that were just way out of my comfort zone. I went back to school when I was 36, 37. So I was interning. If you've ever seen the Friends episode where Chandler's a marketing intern, like that was me, and that's how it felt. And it was incredibly overwhelming, but there were so many platforms and technologies that I was suddenly being asked to not only use, but master. It was incredibly overwhelming. And as time went by, I would think about clarity comes from engagement. The only way to get comfortable with things like building websites, being on Twitter, being on Instagram, learning things like algorithms is to kind of get in there and be really patient, really kind to yourself, and really curious. And that was something that I had from the start. Like, how does this work? What works better? Who's responding to this kind of content or this kind of platform, and why? And like, I just learned to make a reel for the first time the other day, and it took me hours. I just had never really had to make a reel. But yeah, you just have to stay curious and patient with yourself, and you get better as you go, and to see what other people are doing. So that's really kind of what has happened in my professional experience. And clarity does come from engagement. So that's what we're hoping to give you a little bit today, so that you feel comfortable wading into this platform. We realize that there are going to be all sorts of people attending this. There are going to be people who really understand Instagram already and just want to know, what are the tips and tricks for promoting my research on Instagram? And then there's going to be those of you who really don't know, like maybe you have an account, but you're nervous to make a post, or you're nervous to make a reel, or things like that. So we are aware there's going to be lots of levels of audience interaction. And so, yeah, so we're looking forward to getting started. If I can change my slide.
Thanks, Tanya. So I wanted to start off with a couple of numbers, because one of the things that really shocked me the most about social media and knowledge mobilization is the scale. So I tried to make a chart, but the scale is so vast that charts don't even work. So, right now we have traditional academics that are, potentially publishing articles, publishing a book, couple of books, maybe doing some public lectures if they're saying like, I want to get my work out into the public. And for me, I kind of did a little breakdown. It's like, okay, in the past 10 years, I think I've sold about this many books, and like, I can see that these articles got this many views, and this is generally how many lectures I've given. And so I estimated my audience at about 7,000, which is, I'd say probably mid-range for a lot of academics over a period of 10 years, maybe a bit bigger, maybe a bit smaller. And then I looked at the breakdown that I was getting from Instagram about views on my content on this anonymous research-based Instagram account that I run. And I'd gotten 7 million views in just over 3 years. And because I've maintained a consistent kind of like presence on the account, and I have people kind of like know what to expect, and there's a community, it's only escalating. So now I get about 200,000 weekly views. So the scale of like, reaching 7,000 people over a period of 10 years versus 200,000 people in 1 week, like there's just no comparison. And this is why I really wanted to do this workshop with Tanya today, because I know there's so many people out there that have the data that the public needs, the research that everybody needs right now, and it's just not getting through. And this is significant because we know that policy leaders are drafting legislation based on these disinformation campaigns and social media. So how do we fix this situation? How do we kind of like jump into the driver's seat and make sure that the data that the public is accessing is rigorous and true? Oh, sorry, Tanya, click. So what I did, as was mentioned at the beginning here, I work on sex work and with an emphasis on the history of sex work and what's in the archives. So there's a lot of things that people talk about in the history of sex work that has to do with people that aren't sex workers, like the police or moral reformers or something like that. So I wanted to do an experiment. I was like, what if I built a public-facing research project that was just for workers themselves? When they're dealing with these different kinds of issues, like say there's a big change in like liquor legislation for strip clubs, and it's affecting people's income. Like, what is the kind of data that I could provide that week that offers some context to what is happening and what people have done in the past to fix that kind of situation? In the winter of 2020, my account was suddenly deleted as part of a larger scale crackdown on sex workers on Instagram. And that was a real wake-up call, because what I saw was, thousands and thousands of people suddenly lose their businesses in the middle of the pandemic and 2 days before Christmas. And this was the result of more disinformation campaigns being used to basically get Instagram to, block people from these very lucrative platforms. So for me, I realized, like, scholars, we have to be more in touch with the communities that we're claiming to represent, and support them in real time. So things that are coming up right away, we have knowledge that is beneficial. How do we make sure that people can access it if they want it? So it's really important to be proactive. And so that's why it's important to develop this kind of public facing practice that you're keeping up over time. We have to respond to disinformation before it's being passed into law. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now. So yeah, I asked myself, how can I be of service to this community? How can I create research practice that serve a community rather than just take from it for my own career benefit? And how can I also build a public-facing social media strategy that's still equitable, prioritizes safety, and is also sustainable? So it doesn't cause burnout, doesn't make me just kind of be unable to continue the practice. Next, thanks. Sorry. So if you're interested, there's 3 amazing works that I highly recommend. Anyone that's going to build a social media practice, just read these up front. Number 1 is Ruha Benjamin's groundbreaking book, Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code. And what Ruha Benjamin does is she talks about how digital technologies are not neutral. These aren't just kind of like scientific algorithms that are just repeating the truth. There's a big problem with the way that tech is developed. And basically, they've been using biased data sets this entire time. They've been using things like, looking at, say, 1 million photos that are labeled beauty in English from North America, and say 80% of them show a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman. And so the algorithm will automatically say beauty equals this. So we have these deep set biases in the data that's creating the foundation for the new digital age. And I'm not just talking about Instagram. Ruha Benjamin also talks about AI, right? So these data sets are also being used to develop car driving technology, surveillance technology, all of this stuff. So we need to basically understand the larger stakes at what's happening with this, the algorithmic term. Number 2, Azim Azara, The Exponential Age. This is such a great book. It's for everybody. Recommend it to your non-scholar friends, recommend it to anyone in any discipline. It's like a big bird's eye view of what's happening right now, kind of from a historical and technological perspective. And his focus is on the rate of change. So basically the rate of change with digital technologies is basically going vertical right now. So we're experiencing rapid social, political, and economic change. And he has a lot of really important insights, I think, for kind of preparing for those changes in real time. And finally, if you're like, I am overworked, I cannot manage 2 more books right now, really watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It provides a simple breakdown of how algorithms work, how they're very exploitative, and things you need to bear in mind when you're building a social media practice to make sure that you're also taking care of your mental health and welfare. And that's a lot of it's based on the work of this Kathy O'Neill, who was a mathematician who wrote a groundbreaking book called Weapons of Math Destruction, about how algorithms exacerbate inequality. Thanks, Tanya. Next.
Okay.
So again, you know, we are seeing the impact of these disinformation campaigns everywhere around us right now. You know, Ruha Benjamin reminds us technology is not neutral. These platforms are not neutral. They uphold certain kinds of content and constantly attack and pull down other kinds of content. And the result is a profoundly unequal digital public sphere. These are private corporations. They have no obligation to share with us they're like what makes their algorithms, what's banned, what's not. So all of this is also happening in secret. What we do know about them is that they privilege content that maintains TOP, or time on platform. So they're making a lot of money off of advertisements. So whatever's keeping people scrolling, they're like, more of that, more of that, more of that. Whatever's keeping people sort of like feeling like, ooh, this makes me not want to buy a sweater, or, oh, that puts me in a bad mood. They're sinking that kind of content down. So for example, Instagram introduced without any warning something they called a sensitive content filter in 2021. And they didn't explain what sensitive content meant. But I noticed in my own practice that all of a sudden, any post that mentioned words like police violence or racism automatically got sunk to the bottom of the algorithm. So all of a sudden that content was considered to be sensitive content. So we can see how this is really going to affect public discourse around, you know, issues that really matter. These are also platforms that are incredibly cheap to create disinformation campaigns for. So when we see things like, you know, the 2016 election with like all of the manipulation of public discourse surrounding like the election of Donald Trump, the 2021 US insurrection, the new anti-critical race theory curricula policies in the United States, where they're basically not going to talk about things that make people feel bad about history. And also the anti-trans legislation that is sweeping the United States. All of these have documented roots in social media algorithms and misinformation campaigns that are created by small groups and funded and used to take over basically public discourse. So it's inexpensive, it's lightweight, and it's very effective. So this is why we need to figure out as an academic community, how are we going to respond to this? How do we build something better? Next, thanks, Tanya. So if you're like me, I know for a lot of scholars, one of the biggest deterrents to doing this kind of work is concerns about safety. And those are not, those are real. A recent article that just came out in Science just a few days ago did a survey of North American and European doctors who had been in the public talking about COVID or the vaccines or whatever. And 38% of them had reported receiving threats or harassment for presenting COVID-related data or research to the public in the past year. The data set wasn't big enough to talk about how women and women of color disproportionately faced more vitriol and more kinds of like pointed campaigns. But anecdotal evidence and emerging data suggests that that is also the case. So this is very real. And it's important that if you're thinking about developing a social media strategy, really of any kind, but particularly if it's on like a hot topic issue, to build the safety structures and sustainability structures for yourself right into your plan from the very start. You know, there was also one historian from NYU, I think, who was talking about why this was happening. And it's basically they want scholars, they want scientists to shut up. They want us to be too scared to talk. And that has been working. And so we need to figure out, okay, so like, how are we going to develop something that can deal with that kind of, this kind of thing. All right, next, thanks, Tanya. So one of the best things that we can do is, as we're developing an Instagram practice, as we're developing our social media public facing research practices, is to educate ourselves about what is going on underneath the surface to make sure that we're responding appropriately and also like getting past a lot of these traps. So my account is still considered to be like, I really wouldn't be surprised if it's gone tomorrow. It's constantly on the edge of being bannable content, even though it's like very, what we would call like vanilla content. There's hardly even like elbows in my Instagram, because I have to really watch it. But I don't want to give it up because it serves the people that I want to serve. And it gives them data that they need and that they want. So to do this, we have to educate ourselves about what's going on in the tech industry and then how it applies to us and the data we mobilize. So this is Timnit Gebru. She's one of the most famous computer scientists in the world. She was fired from Google in 2021 for publishing a peer-reviewed research paper. And her specialty is on racial bias and AI. And her main concern was how Google was basically developing AI technologies based on these racist these data sets that had embedded bias deeply in them. And so she could kind of see this automation, right, of discrimination. And she took action. So she's part of a larger movement and part of this group called Black in AI that is really focusing on this particular issue. And to figure out how it's affecting also like whatever it is that you're dealing with, for me, it's constantly thinking about like, okay, how is sex work kind of like language being monitored on the algorithm? How can I sort of like shift this language to protect the account, to protect the followers, all of this stuff? We have to look at kind of like how they run. So an algorithm is basically just like a collection of data that is used by software to predict online preferences or behaviors. It's like that innate design, right? Where you're like, oh, where should this thing be? Oh, it's here. So this is used as a really big tool in marketing, and it's used in different ways across different social media platforms. As we enter the age of artificial intelligence, of AI, this is significant because algorithms are used in AI to predict patterns and to anticipate human reactions, like how do humans drive cars? How would they deal with this? How would they deal with that? And it can also be used to automatically target and eliminate undesirable content and populations. So I told the story of, you know, all of the workers that lost their businesses in 2020. So this is also a very dangerous kind of technology because it can be used for surveillance and for basically like, yeah, imposing discriminatory policies that are not democratic. The worst part about this is that what the algorithms that are used by these social media platforms are kept secret. They're considered to be like a trade secret. So we know that there's widespread unregulated use of biased data sets in the tech industry, but there's just not enough awareness about what they are and what they're potentially going to do. So for us today, we're going to be talking about a visual algorithm. So Instagram isn't just text, right? They're not just kind of like reading the text, or the algorithm's not just reading the text. It's using images. It's also using footage. It's using sound. It's even using things like video resolution. So it's important to kind of be like, okay, I'm going to work with this particular kind of platform and sort of understand the best way to get through this algorithm. All right. And I think that's it for me, Tanya, for now.
I'm muted, rookie mistake. Okay, so first of all, you want to determine your online presence. So really thinking about how you want to use this platform, who you want to be on it, and what kind of content you want to produce. You are experts in your field, so we want to hear from you. But that I wouldn't just go on and start posting. So a lot of research is your first step. The most important thing I think you can think about is to consider your audience. right away? Who do you want to reach? Who are you trying to target is a very predatory word, but who are you trying to reach and who are you trying to get to follow you? How can you find them? And part of that, that's twofold. What kind of content can get to them? Where are they? What kind of hashtags might they be using and following? What kind of accounts do they follow? The other part of that is, how are they using the platform? And part of the way that you can think about that is how you use the platform. LK mentioned this earlier, like she's really busy and she doesn't have time to read more books and things like that. So you have to think like there's a lot of really busy people and we are all trying to come down at the end of our day, or maybe we're in the car and we're scrolling. Maybe you've had a really tough day at work and you're sitting on your couch and you have a glass of wine and you're just scrolling mindlessly. So think about how people are using this platform. And there is this tendency really to just mindlessly scroll, and it's built for that. It's trying to get you to do that. It's trying to keep you on longer. But that also means that what you need to do with your content is try to find something that's going to capture the attention of your audience enough that they stop scrolling. A perfect example of this happened last weekend. I was with my mother-in-law and she was saying, I don't understand TikTok. Like, why is it such a big deal? And she's 70. And so I showed her some TikTok and I showed her the Washington Post, which I don't necessarily read the Washington Post, but I think that how they've done their TikTok presence is really interesting. They've really tried to take newsworthy content and take it at its most high level to make it engaging for their audience. Anyway, so I showed her the account and then I walked away to do something. And when I came back, she was like mindlessly scrolling on Washington Post. This is a 70-year-old woman who doesn't have social media presence. So you have to think about that. Like, we need to capture our audience while they're scrolling. So really thinking about how to do that. So your content isn't for you. What is what that means? Your content needs to have your audience in mind. You might have absolutely fantastic things that you want to say and fantastic research, but if you don't really think about how it's going to be received, it just might not reach the audience you want. The other thing you need to think about before you even start is thinking about what you want to be known for. How do you want to stand online? Who are you? How are you going to communicate that? You're going to have to provide your audience with valuable content. You're going to have to prepare to interact. This means responding to people when they talk to you in the comments. It means engaging with them. It means supporting other accounts that are like-minded. There is a little social media world on there that you're going to need to really start engaging with if you haven't already. And then the third thing is that you're going to want to stay current on trends and platform changes. Things change all the time. That's why whenever I'm researching something about social media, make sure it's within the current year or the later part of the previous year. You're going to want to keep in mind trends, platform changes, watch for accounts that you like and see what they're doing and push yourself to learn new things. So that's just something that's really going to have to be part of your Instagram practice. And when you think about it, really how we access businesses, services, or people, the first thing that I do when I want to find something, whether it's a new hairdresser or it's a new store or a business or whatever it is, or it's a job I'm interested in, whatever it is, I go to their website and I check it out. And then I go to their social media and I check it out. And this tells me a lot about them. This tells me if they're current, if their content's fresh, is it together, is it modern? If you went on a website that wasn't really strong, or an Instagram page or a Twitter page, Twitter account that really wasn't very present, or it looked really old or out of touch, you might lose some trust at this point. So there's a lot of credibility in terms of having these social media accounts, your digital content being fresh and put together. Socks have to match. Your images have to be the right size. You really have to have a nice setup for it. So the other question is really, why are you here? What's going to set you apart? What's your goal for being here? So your content needs to be in support of that goal. And it should really be useful, entertaining. It should be authentic. It wasn't so long ago, maybe like in the last year or so, that grids were really highly curated. They were very artful and deliberate. Like if you looked on certain celebrity accounts, they were all one color. They all blended and looked really perfect. And there were lots of apps that were being shared to show you how you could create this highly curated Instagram grid. So it looked really, really vibrant and artistic. And that hasn't really stuck around. These days, people are wanting more authentic content. They want to be able to trust the person who's behind that account. They want to be able to follow them and feel like they have a bit of a relationship with them. To be honest, the last 6 products that I've purchased online were through influencers that I trust. So there's like a realness there. You don't want to be too curated. You want to have an authenticity to you. So one of the biggest things that you can do before you get started is to see who's doing it well and do some serious research. I like to always check out other accounts that I like. I am on TikTok. I love watching TikTok videos, but I haven't ever posted a TikTok. So I'm still in kind of the research phase of that to see who's doing it well, what kind of approaches they're taking. And you only really know what's out there and what you like by looking around. And inspiration can come from all sorts of places. So yes, this is for academics and scholars, researchers, but you might find that you're inspired by the style of, I don't know, like a beauty account or something with shopping or cooking or things like that. There's so many different approaches that different people are taking on their accounts that it's good to see who's out there and then what you kind of are interested in doing on your own. I'm going to show you 3 examples of, these are TikTok reels, but there are reels in Instagram. So it's the same kind of thing. This is really to show you the kinds of research that you can present, and I'll show you these now.
Fun fact, the first woman to act out an orgasm on screen is the same person who invented the technology that forms the basis for secure Wi-Fi today. Ladies and gentlemen, her. This is the story of Hedy Lamarr. I love her so much. So the story begins, it's right before World War II, and Hedy is unhappily married to this Austrian arms dealer, this guy. At this point, she's already done the orgasm scene, and she's pretty famous for it. One night, historians think that she overhears her husband and some of his Nazi friends talking about how they can mess with American-made torpedoes that use radio controls. Hedy runs away eventually, and she makes her way to Hollywood, but she remembers this conversation. Hedy keeps getting more and more famous, but at this point, it's 1940, and she's feeling pretty guilty being rich and famous during World War II. She really wants to help. So she and her friend George, this guy, he's a pianist, they started thinking about that problem of how to make radio signals more secure. The problem that they're dealing with is that to send radio signals, which now form the basis of Bluetooth and cell signals and Wi-Fi, one machine has to encode information onto radio waves, which have to get sent through the air, and then another machine has to be able to detect and understand them. But what's to stop any other machine nearby from doing the same thing? Hedy figures it out. Change the frequencies of the radio waves in an unpredictable way. This is called frequency hopping. The transmitter and the receiver are going to know the sequence of changes ahead of time, but any other device, including the ones that the Germans have, it's going to look like gibberish to them. So this is the patent that Hedy and George get for a device that actually does this. This thing is amazing. So they give it to the US military, who puts it in a drawer. Doesn't use it during World War II, tells Hedy that she would be more useful to the war effort as a pinup girl than as an inventor. But eventually...
So I'm going to stop it there because we're going to go on to the next one. But she does a kind of a series called Page Not Found, and it highlights women in history who she would have loved to be taught about in school and who aren't there. So there have been other teachers who have come in and used her content in their classrooms and things like that. So that's one approach. You can look at this one from NPR.
Should we make daylight saving time permanent? President Nixon thought so. The US actually tried this in 1974, and Americans hated it. Nixon did this in response to a global energy crisis. The idea was that more sunlight later in the day meant people would use less energy, but that idea wasn't very effective. And during the shortest days of winter, people had to start work and school in the dark. In early January, people in some northern states didn't see the sun rise until after 9:30 a.m. That law was eventually repealed. Nevertheless, the Senate last week unanimously approved a new bill that would make daylight saving time permanent. Why? Advocates say more light in the evening would cut crime, improve people's health, and boost the economy. Plus, it would end the ritual of changing our clocks back and forth. Only time will tell if we spring forward for good or fall back and history repeats itself. Should we make
Okay, and then my last example.
Bonjour, this is Brando's Ojibwe language word of the day. And in your word of the day, I'll be answering this question right here. And Justice B says, could you educate us that don't know what a bundle is? And this is in response to that video I posted the other day about the Freedom Convoy, where there was a bundle laid out for everybody to see. It's not cool for the ones taking the picture of that bundle, and it's not cool for the ones who agree to share it in that way. But let me share with you in the language what we call a bundle, the Anishinaabe. So your Ojibwe language word of the day is shkibitagin. Shkibitagin. Shkibitagin is a sacred bundle. Now, what is a sacred bundle? Well, let's look to the language first because it will tell us. Shkibitagin. Shkibitagin. Bi comes from bidon, to bring something, bring it in. Shki means what happens first. And tagin means something that's a carrier. So shkibitagin means literally it's the first thing brought in when you're doing a ceremony. And a sacred bundle can be two different things. A bundle can be something that you carry inside, where you carry your sacredness, where you carry a lot of your teachings and all of those different positive things that we pick up along the way in our journeys. We carry them in our sacred bundle. It's more of a metaphor. But then there's the actual physical shkibitagin. One of the teachings that I'll share with you, about carrying that bundle is that you might think that we carry the bundle, but the bundle actually carries us. That's why we have to show it so much respect. That's your word for the day, shkibitagin. And I hope you all get a clear picture of why that picture that was shared, I guess it was shared on Twitter, why it was so offensive to us Anishinaabe peoples, to all Indigenous peoples. That's it, miigwech. Bonjour, this is Brando's Ojibwe language.
Okay, so 3 very different approaches to sharing information. And again, I realize we're talking about Instagram, but this is a way that Instagram and TikTok are sharing information on both platforms. But what I would recommend is taking a look and seeing what kind of content you like, what kind of content grabs you, and beyond that, what kind of grids and bios and basic accounts are really doing it well. And from there, you'll be able to consider how you want to craft your own. So when it comes to setting up your account, it really is all in the details. Nothing worse than a sloppy account or a bad image, or not having your highlights set up properly, things like that. Like, you really want to take some time to set up your account and how you want to really organize that content. So you can see there's a QR code there if you want to grab it on your phone, or I think Laura is going to drop in the chat a link to our Instascholar handout. So that handout is going to give you lots of tips and tricks for setting up your account. Things like links, like you can't click a link on Instagram. So how do we do workarounds around that? What are some really interesting ways that people are setting up their highlight reels, or their highlights along their account? What kind of information should your bio contain? And then, thinking about like how you want to organize your grid, if you want to organize it in a certain way. So, but really taking some time before you start to do anything and setting it up is you want to look at what other accounts are doing it well, and then make sure you take that time to set it up as well. From there, you're going to think about creating content. Now, this is up in the top right here, you see 3 images. This is credit to HubSpot, to an article that they put out about Facebook and Instagram ads. So for the ads, they wouldn't, for a long time, they do now, but they wouldn't allow images that had more than 20% text on them. Now they do allow that now, but I would still say for ads or for your general content, you don't want to have more than 20%, because it doesn't blend into the feeds that people are scrolling through, but it is also just too much. If you look, you have on the left-hand side there, that's 4% text, 12% in the center, and 44%. Now, if I'm sitting at the end of a long day, got my wine, Googling, Netflix is on in the background, the dog needs to go out, like, I'm not stopping and looking to read that text on the 44%. It's just not happening. So what I'm doing is I've been there, I'm overwhelmed, and I just keep scrolling past. Now, sometimes, and I've seen a lot of academic accounts that are kind of notorious for this, where they'll take a poster and they'll put it up and it's got all the content. And this is what I mean by saying your content's not for you. It might feel like you need to have all of this information on here, all of, the write-up and the abstract and all that stuff. It might feel like you should have that there, and then you're checking off your box, but you're actually alienating the people in how they're using the platform, because no one's going to stop and read like a giant, block of text on an image or from the post itself. Now, you can post quite a bit of content in the text spot on your Instagram post, for example. And back in the day when the blogs were big, everybody had a blog. And then the blogs sort of fell out of favor, and then everybody started to go over onto Instagram. And some accounts started to take their blog post and basically put it into their Instagram post. So then you have, again, this giant block of text. And it might feel good to say, okay, I got all the content in there. It's everything that they need. But who's sitting there and reading an entire article in the post? They're not. So again, you need to really think about your audience, how they're approaching your platform, what's going to make them stop scrolling to pay attention to your content. Give them the high level important points. Hook them. Something really interesting, grab their attention, and then send them to more information that you might have on your webpage, on a school page, on an event page, where they can actually read more information about that. But if you put it all in the post or in the image, it's not going to do much good. They're probably just going to scroll fast. The other thing that you want to do is always include a call to action. You want to tell them where to go next. You want to tell them what they want to do. So your post should always say like read, watch, view, click. Those little things just give them a little bit of information for what they're going to need to do in the next step. I'm going to turn this back to Lori again.
All right, thanks. And I just wanted to reiterate that link that Tanya provided in the slide. And also there's a link to it in the chat. Documents like that, where you're getting like a full breakdown of like top social media hints or tips, that's people actually usually charge for those, and they're very valuable. So this is a really, really good one that you're getting here for free. So do be sure to like open it up, check it out, because there's a lot in there that is just like classic. Like Tanya and I think working together, I've learned so much from her. And like, there's so many things that as academics, we don't get a chance to sit down with someone who specializes in this and really learn like, okay, I could be just doing this simple thing and it's going to make that much difference for my audience, right? So now I'm going to provide you with a couple of examples of how I build the content I do. And I'm going to talk a little bit about data packaging. So I have a curatorial background as well as like an academic background. And so it's important to remember that museums, usually when they're writing like their text, like their exhibition text, they actually write at a grade 4 level, like a grade 4 reading level. And it's not that the average person has a grade 4 reading level, but that it's not, you don't have to invest a lot of energy into it. It's there, it's clear, it's direct. And it's also like considerate of the person that's reading it. It's like, you need to know this because it's exciting or it's important or whatever. So think about bringing that to your Instagram practice as well, writing actually at a grade 4 reading level. Number 2, what Tanya mentioned about the appearance of these walls of text. It's not what the text says, it's how that looks. That is a style, and that style sends its own messages. Sometimes they're the messages that we don't intend to send. And some people see, academics that like put a big wall of text up, they actually see that as being inconsiderate. And especially inconsiderate of their time, because a lot of people use Instagram and other platforms in their little in-between spaces as well. Like they're about to get on the subway and they're just like scrolling really quick, or like they have to jump on a Zoom call in 10 minutes and they're just kind of chilling out, right? So just being conscious of people's really stressful lives and inviting them into something that is of benefit to them is really important. Now, as academics, we tend to actually use text to deal with this next problem, which is the emotional landscapes that already exist on social media that are profoundly problematic. So a lot of ideas, you know, as the one teacher was speaking about on the TikTok, like a lot of people are like ripping stuff off, using things very exploitatively. There's all these myths and ideas rooted in colonialism, racism, and dehumanization that are just being reiterated constantly on social media. Academics, what we like to do is we like to like explain, oh, this isn't correct because da 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 da, and then there's that wall of text again, right? So what I do is I do like a portion control for each post. So each post or each reel has one deliverable. It's one story. And instead of telling people that like, oh, this thing is incorrect or this thing is wrong, and I'm going to explain why, I just only show them in a simple story. And then I use things like hashtags to link it into whatever discussion is going on. So most recently, this is happening all around the world with anti-trans legislation. So these lobbyists have basically like influenced lawmakers to pass this scary legislation targeting trans people. And one of the cornerstones of their argument is that being trans is a new thing, right? That this is some kind of wild new invention, right? And so what I do is instead of saying like, no, that's not true, I just show that it's not true. And I give people a story. And usually it's a story that in some way punches up. Like I could talk about histories of violence for a long time because I know a lot about them as a historian. But when I put that kind of stuff on Instagram for that person that's like, I already have a lot to deal with, I have to give it to them in a way that is helpful, right? So when you give people things like a story, a single image, a look on a face, a dress, like a moment, a name, you're opening up a world for them or a moment for them where they can see things for themselves, right? And you give them that kind of like ownership over the story and whatever way they're coming to it from. So this is one example of that. This is a post that I created, actually a reel, sorry. Tanya, would you mind clicking onto the next screen and then just hitting play? This is what it looks like on Reels. And it's got sound on it. Oh, sorry.
I'm muted, so I'm going to start that over.
It's okay. So this is a story that I found just in the archives. And it was basically like, I could tell a lot of stories about this picture, but one of the things I learned about this woman was that her mother dressed her for school in dresses. And so I swooped in on that. And the narrative there is trying to also connect with people that are parents or family members who are like standing up for their kids. So this is kind of like that emotional landscape that you can offer people. It's funny, I'm choking up at my own content, but it's meaningful, right? Like it's really meaningful. And it's important to give people what are you going to replace the disinformation with, right? It's like, there's all this stuff out there. It's very problematic, but like, what is the replacement? And this is, I think, where scholars, we get stuck. It's like, we don't know how to build the replacement and then to mobilize it at scale, right? To get it out to like as many people. So this is the challenge. Okay, next, thanks, Tanya. So here's an example of another reel that I did based on the work of Sonia Purnell, who studies, she actually studies like a spy in the Second World War that worked with a madam, but no one ever really talked about the madam and these workers that actually created like a sabotage brothel to like spy on the Nazis and like poison them and things like this. So for Remembrance Day, I was thinking about like how many sex workers work in wartime, what they go through, and how they're never really discussed or honored, right? And how this is so tied to the way that they're treated today. And so I created this little reel using archival footage. And I recommend using things like archive.org or like stock footage. If you don't have the actual image to go with your text, you can create something that still does things like ding on a face, a human face, because the Instagram algorithm, when you show it a face, it'll actually boost the content. So, kind of like little tricks like that. So how to make your work stick, right? This is my little acronym that I've created for our time today. Number one, as Tanya said, like it's got to be actually social. It's the social and social media, right? How is your content of service to others? What makes people stop and say like, I can use this. This is for me. Build and contribute to a community. Don't just put your own stuff out and constantly champion your own stuff. Look at what other people are doing around you. Like there are some amazing people on Instagram that are like fighting the real fight. They are doing like amazing, powerful, impactful work. And like celebrate it, share it, engage with them, lift up the people that, you see around you that you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And yeah, so share and support other creators. This is really like a team effort. And this is how it's also a little bit different from academia. We tend to kind of, do our own things and focus on our own research. This stuff's got to be more social. Timely, this is a big one. Make sure that, when you're coming up to a time in the day when people are, say, about to go for lunch, or they just woke up and they grab their phones and they're scrolling. Think about when you're putting things online. And just so you know, Instagram actually will show you your peak times, like for your followers. It'll say actually like most of your followers are online. Mine are often online at 3 p.m. I wake up really early. I've got a different time clock than a lot of my followers. So I always have to think about like what's going on in their day. When do they have time to see this? Number 3, image forward. Instagram is a visual algorithm, so you have to use images. So anchor your message to an effective image and also use the image to tell the story, right? It's not just like this is the illustration. It's like the image is the point. Like I have this image that serves the story so well, and the image sticks with people as well. Concise. Remember that portion control, like one story proposed. Academics, like, we're so bad at this. We just like, we can kind of like get onto a tangent or whatever. Just one thing, only one thing proposed. And finally, kill it in terms of like knock it out of the park, but also kill this embedded censorship and bias, right, in the algorithms. So you have to build content that's aware of the algorithm and the restrictions it might be trying to place on you and your content, especially if it's challenging or controversial content. So be careful with things like using controversial words or hashtags and just throwing them on there, because it can really sink you. How could you say what you mean without getting automatically deleted or basically like put down on the algorithm? Stay on top of changes to the algorithm and back up your account, because you could, develop like a nice big huge following, and then suddenly the next day all of your work is gone. Everyone has lost a connection to the research that they wanted to see, and this inequality has won on the algorithm. So make sure that you follow these to kind of like create like data that will get out there to people. Okay, and I think that's it for me. Oh, sorry, one more thing is the safety and wellness tips. Yes, this is a big one. And this is something that I had to figure out for myself. What did safety and wellness look like for me? What were my main concerns? And like, how could I keep this going without burning out? So every person's going to have their own answers to these questions, but just make sure that you're building your safety and wellness policies into your strategy from the very start. This is a marathon, not a sprint. If you want to be able to continue to contribute to public discourse, you have to make sure that you are in a position to do so and feeling okay. Number 2, anonymity is a-okay. If you want to be anonymous, if you're working on content that you're worried about, like, people targeting you or something like that, you do not owe people any information about yourself on the internet, including where you work, like where you teach, all of these things, right? So what you can do is build a classroom instead of a personal account. So this is what I do. I basically run my account as an extension of my classroom. So like I've got all this, I'll be covering something in class today and it's like, oh, I'll just toss that up on the Instagram. And it also opens up the doors to the academy to make sure that, there's not just a small group of student accessing good content, right? That every day people can have something that it's like, here's this, if you want it. 3, the haters, the harassers, they're pretty, like, they come up occasionally. It's pretty clear when they do. Just, you just block people sooner rather than later. Don't wait until something is getting a little bit out of control. And also share with people, like if you're having problems, if you feel uncomfortable, talk to other people about it, let them know, and also flag it with Instagram as well. Like if you block someone, they won't just block that person, they'll also block any other account that they could create, right? So it's improving on Instagram in terms of like, these harassing messages and stuff like that. But really, like, still, like, we are the ones that have to be the most sort of like aware of our safety and our wellness. We can't rely on other people to do that for us. Number 4, safety and wellness goes both ways. And that includes maybe disseminating content that might be disturbing to other people or might show people in a way that's not consensual, or is culturally, like if there's proprietary knowledge with certain things. So make sure that you're following your institutional policies about privacy and ethics, and support equitable representation. So making sure that people also, if they want to talk about their history, providing spaces or stepping back or doing whatever you need to do to make sure that you can, at the end of the day, like, go to sleep and feel like that was handled in an ethical way. And finally, my last piece of advice is just punch up, not just in terms of creating data that has a story that can serve people, but build your practice in a critical way that has some kind of benefit, either a benefit to your community, a benefit to yourself in terms of upping your skills. When we do walk away from Instagram at the end of the day, whenever this platform will collapse and another one will come up, it's just inevitable. We have to say, like, there was something there that was beneficial. And I think that's also something that's really important to remember when we're working with these kinds of platforms. All right, that's it for me.
Okay, so if you're like me and watch Emily in Paris and you are on social media and you're a marketer or in comms, you probably want to tear your hair out when you think about how they present Emily in Paris is just like, of course, I'm just posting on social media, like just a hashtag, just a selfie. And if you follow marketers and comms people on LinkedIn, comms people on LinkedIn, there's a lot of jokes about Emily in Paris because it's not how it works. This stuff takes a long time. There are a lot of jokes about interns when social media takes something happens on there that's not ideal. And people joke that it's the interns. They're not interns. Like these accounts, like especially large accounts, have teams behind them. They strategize, they revise, they target. This is work. It's work that reflects your research, your brand, your service, your business. And it's really important that you're careful, you're deliberate, you're strategic, you're effective. And that means that it does take a long time. And that is occasionally can turn to burnout. A lot of people say, like, just do a post. That's always my hair kind of goes up in the back of my neck, like, just do a post. You have to find the right accounts. You have to do the creative. You have to write the copy. You have to make sure that you have the right hashtags that you're tagging. You have to make sure that it reflects what you're trying to do, your overall goal, your overall purpose. So give yourself permission to take a bit of time with it. This is work. It might feel like you're playing around on your phone, but it is work, and it's really important work, as we've outlined. So pro tips to keep you out of that rabbit hole. Schedule dedicated social time, and that includes time for researching what other accounts are doing, and time for content creation. My hairdresser was frustrated last time I went to see her because now hairdressers have to post what they do on social media, whether they're independent or whether they're part of a salon. There's a social media presence there, right? It's a very visual field. And she's like, I don't have time for this. I have kids, I have really busy practice, all this kind of stuff. So she was like, how do I do this? Because it just takes so long. So I was like, give yourself permission to schedule that research time where you're just on there and you're thinking about what other providers are doing and what you like, and really you can save those down. So if you see posts or reels, graphics, bios, messaging, grids that you like, create a little inspiration bank and either save them to your account or take some screenshots. I do that all the time. I have lots of places to store screenshots of graphics or what other accounts are doing. So when the time comes that I need to do something on the fly, I have an idea for a graphic already in mind. And I'm not going to steal it, but I am going to be inspired by it. And then maybe you have a couple hours a week that you're like, this is my dedicated time for content creation. And I'm going to build this into my workflow so that I know that these hours are dedicated to this and it's important. And then the other thing is to do a lot of research. Like, things change all the time. And there are a lot of how-to videos, articles. There are social accounts that are dedicated completely to marketing and to social media. And you can find lots of really helpful information. But as I said earlier, make sure it's current. I would say from the latter part of 2021 or 2022 now, things really change quickly. So you'll notice in the handout that I provided, there are articles at the bottom that I've really liked. Those are from 2021, 2022, and they're largely from places like HubSpot or Hootsuite or Sprout Social. Those are accounts that it's their business to do social media well, and they update their information. So if your images, like the size of your profile pic, how big that's supposed to be, or your Instagram story, like what size that's supposed to be, you'll see that those get updated from time to time. And from there, we're going to turn it over to you guys before we do some workshop stuff. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stop screen sharing if I can. And yeah. Are there any questions? Laura, would they be in the chat?
We're not seeing any questions yet, just people. Orkida loves the frame and tips that you're sharing and is interested in audience interaction and is finding things valuable. Oh. But maybe we can just give people a couple seconds to think of any questions they might have. Okay, I have a question. Oh, no, I'll pass it over to Tracy.
Okay, great. Thanks for all of this. It's been really helpful. So I have a few questions. I'll start with one. What about getting rights for images and music and songs and things?
I can answer that one. So in Canada, what I do is I follow like the fair use provisions in kind of like copyright law. So this is from advice that I got from the copyrights specialist at Robarts. If it's the same as lectures. So if we're using a lecture or if we're using a photograph in a lecture for educational purposes, then that is fair use. If you take a photograph and you put it on a mug and you sell it in your Instagram store, that is not fair use, right? So like, it's just basically the same as lecturing as far as I know. That's the kind of the rule of thumb that I use.
There are a lot of there's a lot of graphics and stuff available. Like if you go on places like Pixabay, for example, if you need, free images, you can do that. We're going to walk you through Canva in a little bit. I don't think it's only if you have a premium account, but there are actual images there for free content. You'll see on Instagram, and this is something I learned the other day that I had no idea. If you are trying to create a reel It depends on what kind of account you have. If it's business, creative, or professional, as to what kind of music is available to you to share, which is really interesting. I didn't know that. So I actually had to like switch the account I was working on to a creative one to get the kind of music that I wanted. And then later I just switched it back to a business one. So there's some weird things. Again, it's that clarity comes with engagement, and you're like, you have to just kind of play around with it and see. I saw a great Instagram reel from Lori and I love the music. So I saved it. And then I now next time I go to do a reel, I can just find that music easily. So there are ways to get around that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Graham Slate, sorry to interrupt here, but Graham Slate is the contact for the University of Toronto Libraries about copyright and scholarly communications questions. Yes, he's the person that I recommend speaking to if you have any trouble. I would just flag, like, a great way for you to flag that, you know, this is indeed the nature of your account is you can either identify yourself as a teacher in your account label, or write for educational purposes in your bio, and just really kind of like hold it up, right? Because you don't want to end up with some weird company being like, this is our whatever. So just, yeah, like a little bit of caution, it goes a long way.
I would also say if you are using an account where there's free images like Pixabay or something like that, when you're searching for something, like go down through a few pages. There are certain images that get used everywhere. They're free and people use them. The girl, and she's got like the pencil in her teeth and she's really stressed out because she's studying for exams. You see that one everywhere. So like try to go into the menu items a little bit to get one that's a little bit less widely known, I would say.
Yeah, I see Jonathan has his hand up.
Yeah, just sort of two, I guess, kind of interrelated questions. The first one is, how much do you really recommend, having these sort of separate accounts, right? Because, I, of course, I'm of a generation that didn't grow up with social media. So, my accounts can be a little bit messy. I've got a Facebook account, an Instagram account, Twitter account, and, there'll be a mix of like dog pictures and, commenting on, current events and research. Especially for you, LK, it seems like you've got a few different accounts that all sort of do different things. Do you recommend going that way? And related to that is sort of it's almost a time management question, but how do you manage to do all this? Because I know, between like teaching, then marking, then doing your own research and writing, and, I am aware of how much time it takes to do this kind of like really dedicated social media work. Do you do this like ongoing, or do you set aside time each day to do this? Because for me, it's basically just like, I have an instinct, I'll do a social media post, but there's no real strategy to it. And it'll just be something that sort of happens on the go.
I think we can both speak to that. So I'll let you go first. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of creating like the specific like focus for your Instagram, I do recommend creating some kind of a focus if you want to attract external eyes. So if you have important research and you're like, this research needs to get out there, you can create just like even a mini Instagram with a few followers. If they're really engaged, it actually makes a really big difference. So if you do have like particularly specific research, like if you want to try it out, I would go for it. Like, can I ask you, what do you research?
Well, part of my challenge too is that I sort of have a wide range of research interests. Generally, I research like political parties, labor unions, charitable sector organizations, but that's been sort of scattered the last little while. I'm currently doing a paper on the history of police unions and the Winnipeg General Strike. So that's sort of the more relevant thing I'm working on right now.
That's really cool. I would recommend picking like a particular angle into your interests that has a lot of like kind of like unlimited content. So if you created something on like the history of police in Canada, what you could do is you have like it's a broad enough category that you'll be able to find a lot of content, but it's specific enough that you could maybe establish yourself as someone that is the go-to person to speak to about that. And then what you're also doing, and I highly recommend this, is you have an Instagram that's also serving your writing your writing practice. And that's what I'm doing as well. I'm working on a book right now on the history of sex work. And so I've actually sort of like half written the book through a lot of the stuff that I've done on Instagram. And so it's never something that's taking away from what I should be doing. It's always kind of like built in and supporting kind of both sides. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of timing, I regulate. Tanya's advice about scheduling is very true. Like I post 3 times a week. It's all I can do. I'm sure I could, like a lot of people, do better with more posts. I just can't manage it. So I just stick to that, and that's what I can do. And I have like I have a timer on my phone when Instagram turns off, and I use that as well. Yeah. Tanya?
Yeah, for me, I mean, in the different roles that I've occupied where I've had social media on my account or on my phone, I've had up to 13 different accounts on my phone. So it can be stressful. I make sure that I have, my noises turned off at night for sure, because sometimes people are on screen at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning scrolling. But for any kind of personal accounts, I've always tried to keep them separate. Now, I'm not an academic or a researcher, but I have my personal Twitter, for example. I engage in a lot of politics. There might be some jokes on there. There might be inappropriate jokes on there. I don't have U of T related to my account. Like I don't say that I'm staff at U of T or anything like that. I try to keep them very separate in that way. So I think it really depends like what kind of content you have. I've seen a lot of comms professionals they have their professional account. At the school that I used to work at, for example, like all of the teachers had to have their personal accounts, but then they had a professional account. And then that's where they put their content that was related to their work, to the day-to-day happenings at the school, things like that. So if there's anything on your account that you think might be, I don't know, I try to keep them separate myself, and really, really pay attention to boundaries around what you're doing and how long you're on there, because you can get really, really burnt out. There's a lot of people who work in social media who you do it on the weekend, you do it in the morning with your coffee, you do it after work, because that's when you can get to it. And that's totally fine, but you have to really pay attention to when it's too much and you are going down the rabbit hole. But when I'm on there for personal use, that is when I find inspiration in things. So sometimes I'll upload it to a file, like I'll take a screenshot of something and I'll upload it to a file, and it might be 10 o'clock at night and I'm not working. I just was targeted in an ad and I'm like, that layout is fantastic. And then I just take a screenshot, and then when I'm working again, I do it a little bit later. But I'm always getting inspiration and keeping my eye on things that I think are going to be useful to me professionally. And that's one way that I try to navigate it, because I am on social media for me as well. But the more you get into it and the more kind of inspired and invested you get in your account, the more you'll start to seek out and find content that you want to try to replicate, because it's doing some work. It's getting you excited about something. So it is definitely tough with the creating of the content for sure. And we are going to show you how to use a couple of tools to hopefully make it quicker for you. But yeah, again, that clarity comes with engagement. As you do it, as you find other accounts that are doing great things, you're going to have like more inspiration for yourself, and it's going to feel less like work. So that's my recommendation.
Paula raised her hand, and we also have a comment in the question box here about like three posts a week seems like a lot. It is a lot. Yeah, you're right. What I recommend is, for me, it's not so bad, because this is actually something I've built into my work week. And this is also part of, or it serves kind of like a shark direction for me. So when I'm also doing things like planning out my work and thinking about like SSHRC mandates on knowledge mobilization for my funding and stuff like that, I'm saying like that I'm prioritizing that part of my work, So maybe I'm not doing other kinds of academic work as much, but this is like the thing that I've decided to focus on. And also I got used to it. So now I can post pretty quickly because I just have had the practice. And Danielle's completely right. Like just starting small, experimenting, basically like teaching ourselves how to do this is really, really valuable. So if you just do this to like learn a bit more, you're already going to get a lot out of it, I think.
And I think the other thing with that is, I just totally lost my train of thought. Never mind. I'll be back.
That's okay. Paula, did you have another question, or did you have a follow-up?
I had a question, but I think you sort of answered it. My question was really just about how you choose whether to do a story or a post, because I find that sometimes they overlap and I'm not always sure. Maybe I'm thinking to put it in a highlight, and then it should be a story, but maybe I also want it to be a post, but I don't want to double it. So you kind of answered it by saying check out other accounts and how they do them. But I guess that was married before I put my hand up before you said that.
One way to do that too is to think about how people are using it. Like I've found people often, it's one of the reasons Reels got so popular. Like people just want small bites of video content, right? So maybe if I'm on Instagram, I could scroll this way and see what other people are posting. And when I approach my grid, I think about things that I want to live there, that when people go to, I think about the CDHI account, right? And the OVPR account, I think, is a good one too, because I do work for that one as well. I want the grid to show the things that I want to live there, that people will see when they go to the bio, when they go to the account as a whole, and they look at that. A story can kind of come and go. It's a little bit more like of a blip on the radar, but people often at the end of a long day or when they're waiting for something might just go to the stories and just scroll like next, right? And it's a lot of video content. So you also, if you do put something in your grid, like if you post something, I would also recommend adding that to your story and pointing to it. So then people can be like, oh, okay, there's a new post as well, just in case they miss that, because chances are they're going to see it more likely in your stories. And then the ones that really are good and important, then yeah, save down to your highlights. And that's why and that's what I was going to say before, and I lost my train of thought. If you're not going to post a lot, just make sure that you're set up really nicely and cleanly, that you've got your highlights organized, you've got, your images look good, make it look professional. Even if you can't do it often, it's better that people come back to a really nicely crafted account that knows what it's doing than that they're seeing you post all the time. And there's some great accounts at U of T who do this, where they don't post a lot, but when you go to their grid, they've really organized it nicely. And so I would say that's where that initial work and the setup to make sure everything looks clean and done is really important. And then it's less about how often you post. When you get to it, you get to it. I will put some examples of UT accounts in the chat. Yes.
Sorry, Tanya and LK. We had a question earlier in the chat. Berenice asked, how quickly do you have to react to your audience's comments? I'm concerned that answering will eat a lot of time.
That's a good question. I would also budget your time that you spend on comments. And for me, it takes no time. Like the comments are pretty quick. If you have people that ask you something that's like really involved and you don't have time to answer, say, that's a really good question, and maybe point them towards an author or something like that, or a resource, because you can't do that labor, right, all the time. So just really like guard your hours, guard your time, and people, they can read it. They can find it. Does that help?
And when you go to respond to them, it's going to tag them as well. So I often use time when I'm sitting in the car waiting in a doctor's office, and I'm going to be passing time anyway. So maybe that's a good time to respond.
I mean, not that I get a lot of comments right now, but hopefully eventually becomes something a bit more. I'm thinking a bit more involved. So I guess it's a problem for later.
It's a good problem to have. I have too many comments.
Yeah. Charlene in Qatar. I know it's really late over there.
Not so late, just 6:30.
Oh, good.
Hi. I wanted to ask you a question, LK. When you talked about posting and then that content fed into the book that you had made. So that timeline, when you're first putting things onto Instagram or social media platform, and then like guaranteeing that ownership of your content. Like it seems like, hey, first book, then put it out there so that, you know, you have that ownership of that content. Like I'm wondering about that for your process.
Yeah, that's something I was really worried about at first, because I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of start to write the second book in public. You know, the first book I created an Instagram for to market it once it had already been published. And I highly recommend that, by the way. But then I was like, what about if I bring all these people on the trip of like writing this second book? Will people take my ideas, right? I think that's a big concern for a lot of us. And so for me, what I did is I let go of information that I knew I either wouldn't be using in the book. So, you know, I found, say, like a photograph, and it's really cool and really beautiful, but that's not really going to be in my book. And I would use kind of like the, what's the word, like the excerpts or whatever. Or, yeah, like there's actually very little of like my core central important arguments that I'm going to use in the book that I'm giving away for free on Instagram. Very, very little. In fact, almost none. But how this can really benefit everybody who's a writer is that a large Instagram following, or really any Instagram following, as Tanya can tell you, really can help you with book contracts. So if you approach a publisher and you say like, I'm writing this book, I already have 750 followers on Instagram, or like my work, one of my reels got like 20,000 views. That is very, very valuable, and it can really make a big difference. And increasingly, when people are kind of looking at marketing and selling and stuff like that, the first thing they do is they look at what the person is doing on social media. Tanya, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. So I used to work at the University of Toronto Press, and I was their social media specialist. And when a new book came my way, the first thing I wanted to know, are they on Twitter? What's the Twitter handle of, and I mean, it was less Instagram at that point. But yeah, I would want to know their social media handle. I would want to know the social media handle of their department and anybody related to the book. And then, you know, yeah, any other publishers that were associated with it, the university. So that's part of before I could post, I would start grabbing that content and to see how active they were. And if I saw they were on, say, Twitter, for example, and they only had 3 followers, or they weren't really doing anything, I'd be like, okay, well, that's not an avenue to kind of get them at. So that's what I do as well now, is like, who's on social media and how can I tag them? And how can I tag the people in your department so that they're sharing as well? Because you can tag quite a number of people on there. So it is important to have a presence for sure, especially when you're publishing. Danielle has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I've been thinking about, this is like me as like program manager who tries to help faculty members with things. But I know a couple of the research projects associated with CDHI have had the good fortune of being able to write lines into their, write items into their grants to try and build this kind of social media platform into the research project from the beginning. And so I just was wondering, I'm not sure, LK, if you have experience with this. I know Tanya has experience working with our work study student, but thinking about how when people are feeling, once they kind of start getting things going and building momentum, the possibility of hiring research assistants or work study students to help with some of the, once you kind of have a look down, to try and help with maintaining the different sort of social media platforms, especially Instagram and increasingly TikTok. So I don't know if you have some thoughts about how people can try and build that into the resources that they're trying to attract for their projects.
Yeah, I actually just submitted a shirk on this very subject. So it's a very good, I think it's a really important question too. This is a great moment. We're really fortunate, I think, in the university to have a natural solution to all of this, which is that we have all of these students coming up that have much more advanced digital innate literacy, right? From like growing up in the age of social media. who want work opportunities and research opportunities. And then we have all of these scholars that have great knowledge that needs to get out there, but they don't have those digital skills necessarily. So it's like really like a perfect match. And the great thing about it too is that by hiring RAs, and you can even hire undergrads, and they'll do like a pretty good job because they're relatively advanced at all of this, is that these are highly marketable skills as well for them. And as the digital job market is really, really shifting and rapidly expanding, you're actually giving people like marketable job skills and potentially like a work portfolio to sort of hit the ground running once they graduate. And this is an important gap that I think academics and the academy, we've really wrestled with, is that increasingly we're producing people that have these degrees that don't have a job at the end of them necessarily, right? So yeah, like I think what you're proposing is important, and a great way of doing that is getting that funding for those research assistants. And if the academy, if we could actually prioritize also scholars that are working on really important, like timely subject matter, and making sure that they have particular access to these kinds of research assistants when we're identifying areas of priority, like we need urgent responses now to this. Here's this team of RAs that can work with this academic and get good content out onto TikTok like right away. Tanya, did you want to speak to that too?
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. There's a lot of great skills that are, yeah, there's a lot of really great marketable skills from doing that, because you have to think about strategy, you have to think about audience, you have to think about reach, you have to think about ways to communicate your message. I would recommend that, you know, if you do get a research assistant, that you're working with them to develop that, because those aren't necessarily skills that they're going to have. They might, just because they're young doesn't mean they know how to do like that, but they are good at social media and digital and that sort of thing. They might be, but really working together so that you're learning from them as well, so that you're supporting that content. If you have somebody who's doing your social media, you should be sharing that social media. You should be engaging with that as well. If you have a separate account, it's really helpful for them to see that you're on there with them and that you're supporting that content too. It's really important. So, but yeah, I think that they're fantastic skills for them to build. Marketing can sometimes feel like a dirty word, but it's really, this is another way of storytelling that's really, really important and really has a far reach and more visual, right? We want shorter and shorter content. So sometimes I find these days I'm tired. I don't even want to watch a show. I just want to watch a few short little bursts of information. So you're teaching them very valuable skill. And Bernice, I think we have.
Yes, sorry, just to follow up and to comment a little bit on that. One of the things that I really like working with work study students for this, I also carry our departmental account, our departmental Instagram and Facebook account. But sometimes I find just teaching them the voice that you want it, you know, at the very beginning is who I am, how, you know. So just being very, very clear on what they can do, because sometimes they'll write a copy that I said like, oh no, God, no. It's just like, as you know, as a department, I can have these out there, and sometimes not even as a researcher, right? Like, so it's interesting. Maybe they can tell you about the latest meme and tell you how to adapt it to your research kind of thing. But it's also, what I would like to say then is don't let students do all your social media and just say like, okay, just do me a meme and then don't look at it, because, you know, if you're crafting this voice as to who you are in these accounts, sometimes they have a different idea of what's appropriate and what's not, since they're representing you. So just sort of like, it's great to work with them, but just gotta be careful.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important point. Interns and work study students, they need somebody to help them craft that voice and that look and that dirty word, your brand. You want to make sure that, you know, that your voice and your message is accurate. It is a very, very public thing. It is not like they're submitting a draft to you and then it goes through you first. But maybe they should be. Like when I was doing my internship at House and Home, I had to write all the posts for all the different platforms, and then I would run it by my digital editor, and then she would go over it with me, and then she would make like tweaks or changes, and then I would take that content and I would schedule it in all the social media scheduling platform things, and then I would let her know when it was ready, and then she would go into the back end of Hootsuite and say, okay, well, this is at the right time, this isn't spaced out properly. But that's what you're looking for, right? Like you do need to have that oversight, because especially if you're dealing with really, really sensitive content, you can't just have anybody going all willy-nilly and writing whatever, because it could really, really backfire. And it's not anyone's fault. It's part of growing and learning and that sort of thing. And you want your account, your brand, to have like a certain look, a certain tone, a certain feel that reflects you. So working closely with them is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. I actually, to tell you the truth, I don't let my RAs write text. They work on other things, and for these exact reasons. And I let them write the draft of the text. And then honestly, it's usually a full rewrite, to be honest. But they do all these other things that are so valuable that you don't think to budget your time for, like formatting, scheduling, working on like experimental events, like doing all this other stuff. Like I just had my RA set up my link tree, basically like help back up my account, things like that. So there's a lot of like hidden digital labor that they are very strong at. But the actual writing stuff should be you.
Yeah. Researching handles, researching hashtags, making short links so you don't have that giant URL, which is terrible. Things like that. Like that's really important stuff. Elizabeth, you had a question, and then we should do some stuff so we can show you some things.
Oh, I'll put the question in the chat. We should go on to I want to save time for the workshop part. So I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, you better. So, Laura, you were going to show us how to do an effective Instagram post.
Yeah. Well, I posted a couple of examples earlier, just like the reels. If you want to check out my Instagram, the new Social for Scholars little mini workshop space, that's just for me to post stuff for you guys. Anyone that's interested in kind of like sort of the basics. There's some examples of doing like a single post, which is just a photo, and exactly how you do that. So if there's anyone on here that's super new to Instagram, like the basics are going up on there. And then also doing a carousel. So actually adding in a couple of photos in one post so people can actually swipe through and see. And carousels actually get more engagement on the algorithm. So it'll automatically detect like this post contains 5 images. So we're going to like promote it like X% or whatever. I did film a little tutorial for people on how you can take a static image and create a reel. So it's turning a static image basically into a video. And that's really important because reels on Instagram, these little videos, they're basically Instagram's attempt to catch up with TikTok and to compete in that market. So the problem with like for scholars a lot of times is that we don't have footage, or like we're not photographers, we're not filmmakers, or we might just have still footage. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna do a little screen share here. And let's see. Okay. Go. Okay. Oh, shoot. Actually, I can't show it. Okay, hold on here. I think it's because the recording is happening. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, can everyone see this? Great. Okay, so I had to shoot this on an older phone because sometimes you'll notice that when you're trying to upload a reel, it might not show up as one of the options. So if that's the case, just you reinstall Instagram, or like this is my little trusty phone that always works. So here we go. I'm just going to show you how to start a reel or do a reel just with a still image.
Hey, so now I'm going to explain a little bit about creating reels. Reels are really, really great because they actually reach bigger audiences on Instagram. So if you want to create your first reel, come on back over here to this little plus sign, click on it. Boop. If you don't see this, it means that something's up with your phone. So check out the YouTube videos on how to make sure that Reels is showing up in your Instagram as an option. I have to use this older phone today because it wasn't working on my newer phone. But there you go. Now, first thing it does, it says like, hey, do you want to go on Reels? And feel free to say, I do not. I do not want to go on Reels. I would like you to use a pre-prepared picture. So look down here and you'll see this little tiny thing here with the blue plus sign. Click on that. And then it can bring up a ton of other stuff that you've already done. So today I'm going to do one on ghost stories. And I can actually create a 30-second video by adding the same picture over and over again. So click on it, press add, click on it, press add. Okay. And so now I've actually got a 20-second long video that's just like a straight image. So give that a shot. And I'm going to post some more on how to fill up the content in your reel on the next post.
Great. And so from that, you can actually do like rolling text. And I have a full 8-minute long tutorial on how exactly to do that. So what's playing in front of this still image is your text. One thing I wanted to also mention about Instagram and kind of getting that content out there is the use of music. So for that little reel, I used like a fun kind of kitschy 1960s song called Spooky. And I put it out around Halloween. So I was hitting like all of these markers that made Instagram say like, ooh, 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 that looks good. That looks good. And so that's how you can kind of get those additional views. Another thing, interestingly, Instagram also reads the songs that you're adding to your content, and it'll add your post to a board if it's doing well for all of the videos that have used that song, like on TikTok. And so basically if someone's like, oh my gosh, I love this song and I want to see what other people have posted about using this song. So there's all these different weird ways that you can start to send data out into the Instagram algorithms by really just creating content that's sort of hitting all of their different markers. All right.
That's the same thing with when you use certain hashtags on your stories. They'll put them all with other ones that are really doing well. And then you might end up in, you know, say that particular hashtag series for the day too. So. Hey, I'm going to show you some Canva.
Yes.
So it's the best and it's an easy way. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so Canva is a very, very useful tool. It is free. You can do the premium account. I have created a new account from scratch here because I use a shared account. So you can, that's one of the nice things about Canva. You can share your login with multiple people. So if you do decide that you want to do a premium account, you can share that with other people as well. So this is a brand new account for me. I am doing a premium trial. So for 7 days, I have it for free, but you're going to get like access to other little things that you might not get otherwise. So there is a lot here. So I'm going to take you through the top a little bit. So this is great for if you want to put text on video, if you want to create graphics, there are so many things you can do. My resume is done in Canva, like everything's done in Canva. And it's great to know things like InDesign and Photoshop, 100%. But we don't need to be heroes. We just need to get content out quickly so we can enjoy our lives. So Canva is perfect for that. So here you can see different templates that you have access to. So invitations, cards, resumes. Once you get comfortable in Canva, you will be back again and again and again. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to create an Instagram post. Now you can see here, it's showing me Instagram posts, things that I might want to try. I don't want to try that. I just clicked on it by mistake. There are also features and tutorials and things as well. So I'm going to go up here to create a design and I'm going to create a post, or I can create a custom size. So this is something, for example, if you wanted to create your profile picture and you know I think it's 400 by 400, you know that you need to create that. You can create a custom size here, and then it'll create that for you. but we don't want to do that right now. I'm just going to create an Instagram graphic. So from here, this is your design. So one of the great things about the premium feature is that you can resize this. So if you want to, if you're going to make the image and then you want to turn it into, say, an Instagram story, or you want to resize it for LinkedIn or Twitter or something else, you can resize it, and then you'll be able to either copy that so you have both, or resize what's on the screen in front of you. Then you can title this, like, so you can name this, so you'll have it. There is a filing system in here, so you can create file folders, which have all of your content living in them. You'll be able to see lots of templates, like so. As it gets to know you, your For You options will change. So right now they don't know me, I've just started. So, you know, they're just going to show me lots of different templates. So say I want to, you know, animated Instagram posts, like now I can see lots of templates that I can use, and they're really easy to just go in and adapt to what I want. So say if I want to go in here, I can either take this one and then start playing around with all the pieces. So it's a really, really lovely, easy user, like intuitive tool. It's wonderful. But if I want to go, and then you'll be able to add in things like elements. So lines and shapes and stickers and graphics. So you can see here, like these quotation marks, like say I want to just look for quotation marks. Let's see if those come up. Yeah. So then if I click on this, it's just going to go here, and it's just very drag and drop. You'll be able to play around with it. Super easy. And the way to save your content is to go back to home, and it's just automatically going to save it for you. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to just create a design from scratch. Now, say I don't want this. I want this to be an Instagram post. So now it's going to resize. So say I want to add a photo that's my own. Now I might have a photo on my desktop that I want to use. I may want to look in Canva for some of these stock photos that are trending. What you're going to have access to is really going to depend if you have the premium account or the regular account. But the other thing that you can do, and this is what I was talking before, is Pixabay. So I'm going to show you Pixabay. So Pixabay is a way of going in. You can create a login and do that, or you can just go in and search and take them. So say I want to look for tulips. All these will come up, and then I just download them. These are free to use. You can use them in your stuff. The other way to do it is here. So I'm going to look in Canva and look for tulips. And again, you see them over here. So maybe I want to pick this. So when I click on this image, it's going to drop it into the post. Now I can resize this. I can change it around. I can do whatever I want with it. And there are lots of options. And again, you're just going to want to play with this. I can change out the transparency if I want. Say I want it to be a little bit lighter. I can crop it. I can edit the image. And that will show me ways to do like different filters. So I can change my filters out. You can do smart mockups. There's all sorts of really fun, interesting ways to do this. If I want to flip my image, I can flip it. So again, super, super simple stuff. And you can also upload videos. There's GIFs. There's all kinds of things. You can add a QR code, which is really nice if you're creating posters or things like that. You're just going to click on this, and then you're going to enter your URL, and it's going to generate a code, and then you can add that to your image. But we don't want to do that. So I'm in here now. Now, if I don't want this to move around or anything, I can lock this, and then I can just add things on top. So from here, I'm going to go into, say, text. If you have a logo, you can add your logo. Now, when I go to add in text, you can see there's all different kinds of text. These are just very, very basics. These are text combinations, font combinations that you can use and you can play with, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm just going to add in a heading. Now it automatically populates over here. Now, maybe I hate this font. I do. I'm going to go into the fonts over here, and maybe I'm going to choose this font. Now, some of these you can see with a little crown will be available to you only with the premium. So keep that in mind, but free does quite a lot. So really, unless you're really going to do this like a lot, start with the free and go from there, or share with somebody else and piggyback on your accounts, and just set up a really strong folder system so that your content is separate from theirs, so you can do your own work. So, okay, and now maybe I want to change that font color. And you can add, like, say you have certain colors associated with your brand, you can create like a full system where you've got like all of your branding and all of your colors and your texts and your fonts and things like that. So there's quite a lot that you can do with it. So maybe I want to add that there. Now, maybe I want that to stand out a little bit more. So maybe I'm going to add a square. So why is there a square here? Well, because I'm going to change that and turn that into a little banner. And you just click and you can pull it across. And then again, this is where you maybe want your lock. Like, so when it's done, it's the color you want. You can pick your document colors. You can change things around however you want them. So then from there, we're going to maybe just lock it, change out your text, your colors. You can, and again, it's kind of like Word, where like you can do it depending on how you want your justification, your effects. You can have shadows, lifts, you can adjust and adapt them. But it is a really great way to, you can link stuff, for example. It's a really great way to create a graphic or put text over top of a video, for example, or anything you want. Like our presentation today was made in Canva. You can really do a lot with this. So I would say if you're doing Instagram and you know you want to have great editable photos and graphics, this is a really good platform that does a lot of heavy lifting. So when I'm done here and I want to share it, now keep in mind, you can also add someone else. So say I want to add LK to this, so she can work on it with me. I can add her. I can either add her here or I can share a link so she can access it. And then we'll be able to work on it together. So that is another really useful thing. If you're working, say you were working with a research assistant or you're working with another researcher on something and you want to put stuff together, that's the way to do it. And then when you're done with it, you're going to share it. Now you can download it. You can share it on social. You can actually like send it to your account. You can create a view only link. So say I wanted to share the link with somebody, so they weren't going in and accessing my Canva, but they could see what I had designed and then give me feedback based on that, then you can do it that way as well. But really what I usually use is just download. And you have different options that come up here. So you can choose what file type you want it. It can be a PNG or a JPEG or a PDF. It can be a video or a GIF. So there's so much content you can build in here, and it's so quick to do once you're used to it. It's really worth investing some time playing around. And then one of the nice features about the premium account is that you can download something with a transparent background. So if you just want to add in, a certain kind of graphic, but you didn't want to have the background and you wanted to be able to layer it over another image just completely on its own, then you can have that transparent background. And then you're going to download from there. And if you download your PDF, then you're going to have linkable clicks. So that is really how it is. I'm just going to download it. And you'll
Tanya, yep. I'm just going to interrupt you because we're now at 12 o'clock.
Yes, I'm done.
And oh, okay. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. So I am done. I'm going to stop sharing my content. And that's it. So it's downloaded, it's saved in my file, and you're going to see it on the home screen. So that's just one way that you can create content. And then if you go on Lori's Instagram account, then you're also going to see lots of other ways to load content onto Instagram.
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to add to mention, and thanks for that, Tanya. That was really helpful. Tomorrow I'm going to just be doing like an open office hours on Social for Scholars. If there's something that came up today, or you have a question about your own Instagram presence, just check it out there. I'll just start. I'll go from 10 to 11 if people want to stop by, and you can just ask me questions in the chat, and I can help you out with whatever you're dealing with. But yeah, thanks everyone so much for coming today. This was really, I really appreciated being able to meet with people and hear hear a little bit about what you're doing, and hope to see you again.
And we'll provide information on different accounts that we like and things like that. And that'll go out with the email as well.
Yes, thank you. Please join me in thanking LK Bertram and Tanya Rohrmoser. It was wonderful. I'm sorry that we've come right up to the end of our time. I'm just putting, apologies for the long link, a feedback form in the chat. It's super helpful for us at the Critical Digital Humanities Initiative to hear what people think about the workshops, and it really helps us plan for what's ahead. The idea for this workshop came from people's requests via feedback forms. And yeah, so if you can pass that, or if you can fill that out, that would be amazing. And just a quick plug of some upcoming events. The fourth and final that's the feedback form again. The fourth and final guest in the CDHI Visiting Speaker Series is Dr. Kimberly Christian. Oh my gosh, this is not working. Laura, I'm just gonna ask you to put the link to Kim Christian in the chat if you have a second. Dr. Kimberly Christian is gonna join us on April 7th at 4 p.m. And she's giving a really exciting talk called Always Coming Home, Territorial Relations and Collections Kin. And it's just going to be an incredible way to wrap up a really wonderful Visiting Scholar series. The registration's available at the link Laura's put in the chat. And our final Praxis workshop for the year on media training for humanities researchers, which will dovetail very nicely with this workshop, is on April 13th at 3 p.m. And finally, CDHI is really excited to present our first annual Emerging Scholar Showcase on Friday, April 22nd, which is going to wrap up our year of working with student and postdoctoral research fellows. And so our undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral fellows will be sharing their research in a day of 7-minute lightning talks. So if you're interested to see what critical digital humanities looks like from our next generation of DH scholars, we hope you'll join us for that event. So thanks again to LK and Tanya, and an email will be coming to you in the next day or two with links to the recordings, and we'll include the PDF as well as some other hot tips. So thanks everyone, and enjoy.